Howdy, guys, and welcome to Cliff Notes, and welcome to night number 27 of the overnight feeds recaps for Big Brother season 27. Today's Monday. You know what that means? Veto ceremony. Are we going to have a renom opportunity? Well, yeah, of course we are. Even in this crazy season, yes, we are indeed. Today's a veto ceremony. Mickey will need to pick someone to take Keanu's place. He won the veto. So, of course, he's going to pull himself down, which is going to leave Riley and Kelly on the block. One more spot to fill. So, yesterday, last night, a lot of conversations revolving around who should this third nomination, who should it be? Who do you trust? Who's good for your game? Who's not so good for your game? A lot of conversation. So, let's just get right into it. All right, starting the feeds yesterday afternoon, actually before the TV episode aired, but some conversations that were worth having. So we'll start mid-afternoon or so. Ashley, we'll start with Ashley. Ashley talking to Mickey. A lot of conversations with Mickey since she'll be the one making the decision. Ashley is talking to Mickey, really pushing her that she ought to consider putting up Vince as the renom to take Keanu's place. Remember, Vince is going after Ashley, so of course Ashley would love to see Vince out the door. So she is pushing Mickey to put up Vince. She's thinking that the only people who would be mad if Vince went up on the block would probably be Morgan and Zach because they're both tight with Vince. But other than that, yeah, who's going to care, Mickey, if you put Vince up? Big move, get him out the door. And Mickey's going to consider it as we go through the evening. She thinks that Vinny would win a vote against anyone but Riley. So that's one of her arguments is saying, hey, as long as Riley's already up there, everyone in their conversations is all just assuming basically that Kelly's just going to win. She's going to win the blockbuster comp. So it's going to be Riley versus someone. Every conversation seems like it's predicated on that assumption. So she's saying, look, if Riley's already up there, Vinny can't win against Riley, but he probably could win against just about anyone else. So this may be your best opportunity, Mickey, to get Vinny out the door. So that is Ashley's pitch, her reasoning, her logic. Mickey is telling Ashley, and I think Will was in there as well. She's telling them that she can't put up Vinny though without blowing up her entire game. That it's not just putting him up. But then you get Zach mad, as point out, Zach mad, Morgan mad. And so she is a little bit worried about how that affects her overall game. Mickey does mention his response saying, I don't know if I can do Vinny, but Jimmy's out there as well. So two of the big names we're hearing floated around throughout the evening. All right, we've got Rachel and Mickey talking a little bit about the situation as well. Rachel is arguing against putting Jimmy up. Remember, the two of them are very tight with each other. They throw the criticisms. They do their fake little bickering and all that, but they're close to each other. And Rachel said before she doesn't necessarily trust Jimmy completely, but she's still close to him. And so Rachel is arguing against putting Jimmy up. She says she knows that Jimmy is playing both sides, but so is Vince and Zach and Lauren. And Mickey saying, I know everyone is basically playing both sides. And so Rachel's saying, so why would you specifically target Jimmy? Well, she feels like Jimmy in particular has kind of done her and Morgan dirty a little bit. But yeah, Rachel does not want to see Jimmy go up the door. She says, in fact, look, I'm if Jimmy's on the block, I can't vote to send him home. I can't give you that vote, Mickey. Mickey said, I know. I know you can't, but I think we got the votes anyway. She's saying that if Jimmy wins blockbuster, Rachel saying, look, if Jimmy wins blockbuster, now you've got another enemy in the house, a strong enemy. Why would you possibly do that? And so she's making some arguments, but I truly think at this point, Mickey has decided that maybe she needs to make a little bit of a big move this week. And so, yes, she's aware that she could potentially have an enemy created out of this, but she also is hearing a lot of people throw out Jimmy's name and a lot of assurances that they have the vote to send Jimmy out if he doesn't win the blockbuster competition. All right, Rachel then changes the conversation a little bit. She doesn't want Jimmy to go home, but she's got another recommendation of who could go home, and it's Ava. But not the Ava that we're thinking of. No one is really considering that. At least not that I really heard. I did hear her name mentioned once or twice, but not very seriously. Talk about someone who would have the votes against anyone else in the house. Now, Rachel's talking about a different Ava, and the different person she's talking about as the conversation continues, it becomes fairly obvious that she's talking about herself. She doesn't want to say, hey, why don't you put me up? She's saying, why don't you put up Ava instead? It's pretty obvious she's referring to herself. This is after Rachel found out that Mickey and Morgan had talked about coming from Jimmy. Jimmy had said, hey, Mickey and Morgan want you as the first jury member of the season. Well, Rachel doesn't want that at all. If she's not going to play to the end, she does not want to just go into jury and spend 5 weeks isolated in a jury house. So with that in her mind, she's saying, why don't you put up Ava instead? She's saying Ava isn't going to win the blockbuster comp. I feel like every time she says Ava, I just need to do the air quotes. She's saying Ava won't win the blockbuster competition. And Mickey, you won't have made any more enemies once Ava goes home. She says, and here's the thing. Ava has a good life, family to return to. Oh, and by the way, my kids start school next week. Just nothing to do with Ava, but Ava's got a very good life to return to. And she's saying, and here's the thing, Mickey, she said, I just don't know how fair it is to put Ava in a jury house for 5 weeks where she just has to sit there. Well, someone has to sit there, but Rachel's thinking it shouldn't be Ava having to do it. So she's doing all that. Mickey said, I hear you. I understand. Wink, wink. I understand what you're saying, Rachel. She says, but if I was to do that, I think America would hate me for sending Ava, wink, wink, out the door. And Rachel said, yeah, I don't know. I think they'd appreciate the big move. So Rachel's throwing it out there just as a consideration. Rachel is also suggesting that maybe if she doesn't want to do that, or maybe even instead of that, she's saying, instead, Jimmy, what about Vince? She says, I think there's enough votes to send Vince out the door if he's sitting next to Riley. I think Riley would have the support over Vince, and you could get out Vince instead. And he's saying, so if not Vince, then maybe consider the Ava proposal that I mentioned as well. But she's saying, here's the thing, Mickey, at the end of this, she said, I think Jimmy is much more likely to win that blockbuster competition and pull himself off the block than Vince is, or that Ava is. So you're running a much bigger risk of putting Jimmy up, and then suddenly you've got this enemy. If he does win, blockbuster comes off the block. She's saying the other thing too is she said, we all know, she said, I myself am acknowledging Jimmy is playing all ins. She said, he's a huge target. Everyone's aware of it at this point in time. Why get out a big target? Why not keep him in the game that people can go after him week after week, and you'll have that much more protection, Ashley. So Rachel's talking about that. Rachel's not talking about the votes, and she is not as sure as Mickey is that the votes exist to vote out Jimmy over Riley. Mickey's saying, look, if it's Riley and Jimmy, Riley stays, Jimmy goes home. And Rachel's saying, I don't know, there's more people that are going to be supporting Jimmy than you think. And I just don't know that the votes that you've counted are necessarily in Riley's corner the way you think they are. Eventually, Mickey says, all right, well, a lot to talk about. I want to talk to everybody before I start making decisions. So they do some hugs and things like that. And that's the end of the conversation for now. They'll talk a little bit later. All right, we've got Morgan and Zach talking. Morgan is worried about Vince going up on the block. And so she is pushing that, hey, we need to try to maybe get Jimmy up instead. Remember, Morgan and Vince and Vince and Zach are kind of a trio. I actually add in Mickey as you get the quattro, but especially Morgan and Zach and Vince are a trio. And Morgan's worried about Vince going up, saying, let's just push to get Jimmy up instead so Vince is protected. They're agreeing as well that if they go ahead and do it this week, get Jimmy out instead of Cat, it's probably better for their game. That getting Cat out doesn't really help their game so much. Getting Jimmy and his talk and everyone could probably help them a little bit more. Or we got Mickey talking to Lauren a little bit. Excuse me. Mickey's telling Lauren that taking over an HOH, using her special power to take over this HOH, just so she can turn around and send Cat out the door. She says that's just kind of a waste of an HOH. It's a waste of my special power. That's not what I want to do, Kat. I really don't want. And she says, I used it to protect myself, but I didn't use it because I want you out, Kat. So I just don't necessarily want to do that. She's saying, so Kat, I don't want to send you out. She's saying, I also don't really want to send Kelly out the door because Kelly, first of all, I don't think Kelly's going to come for me. She said, second of all, Kelly's willing to make big moves. Kelly may be willing to go after some targets, get some blood on her hands that the rest of us maybe aren't willing to do, such as a Rachel or a Jimmy or a Vince and others. So she said, I don't know that I necessarily want to send Kelly out the door either. So I don't want to put up. Kelly, I don't want to send out the door. Yeah, who's that leave? Riley or a big move that I may suggest instead? Or we've got Vince talking to Mickey. He's telling Mickey that he's very much on the fence about Jimmy. That he's been working with Jimmy, obviously, but he just knows that Jimmy's been talking to a whole lot of people. So is this Vince perhaps knowing, just getting that little radar going that his name maybe has been thrown out there? So throwing Jimmy under the bus just a little bit. Not sure, but she's telling Mickey that I just don't know what to tell you about Jimmy. She's telling Vince that he should be fine, that she thinks Vince should be fine this week. It's always scary when the HOH says, I think you're good. He's like, yeah, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear you are good. But she's like, I think you should be good this week. Maybe not. Mickey is talking to Kelly. She's telling Kelly, kind of following up on her conversation she had with Lauren. She's telling Kelly, says, I want you to stay. I don't want you to go home this week. You weren't the target when I put you up there. You just kind of, just like every week, kind of volunteered a little bit. She said, but I want you to stay. Mickey is also suggesting, Kelly saying, you're so good at these puzzles. You're probably going to win the blockbuster, pull yourself off. She said, but even if you don't, I think you maybe would be good from a vote standpoint as well. So I think you may be good no matter what, Kelly. All right, Zach is talking to Mickey as well. Zach is telling Mickey that he would take the shot, which he's referencing against Jimmy. He said, yeah, I think I'd take it. But he is worried about Jimmy and Rachel blowing up some of their alliances. So he's saying, heavy hitters would be in trouble. Rachel knows a lot as well. And Mickey's saying, heavy hitters, if I put up Jimmy, the heavy hitters are gone. There's no getting around that. But Zach definitely worried that Rachel and Jimmy have information that he could use against the rest of them. So a little bit nervous about that. Mickey is saying that most of the house has already talked to her and there all seems to be hinting towards Jimmy. And she's saying, everyone's seeming to throw out Jimmy's name. I just wonder how many alliances he is in that everyone's suddenly feeling burned by Jimmy and happy to throw out his name. Just how many people has he worked out agreements with in this house? All right, we've got Mickey and Rachel talking a little bit more, following up on this conversation about maybe sending Ava out the door. Rachel is saying, I thought about it some more, Mickey, and I just don't know that Ava is the best choice to send out the door this week. Mickey says, well, just so you know, I never really considered it. I figured it was just Ava having one of her little moments. And Rachel saying, yeah, I think that's probably all it was. She was just having a little moment here and there. I don't know this for certain, but I didn't pay attention to who was going into the diary rooms when. I just wonder if Rachel may have had a little diary room session where someone may have just said, you're the returning house guest. We really didn't plan for you to choose to put yourself on the block or volunteer to go on the block and go home as a pre-juror. That's really not why we brought you onto the show this season, Rachel. Again, I don't know. I didn't hear any conversation suggesting that. I just have a feeling when Rachel starts suggesting that to Mickey, that people behind the cameras probably immediately start having a meltdown. So suddenly Rachel has changed her mind about sending Ava out the door. And Mickey said, yeah, I never really considered that anyway. Rachel is suggesting that, again, Jimmy's a big target. If you keep Jimmy in the house, he could easily be a weekly target for you, Mickey. Mickey said, I get that. But she's saying, but Kelly's already a bigger target. Kelly's been on the block every week. We've got big targets in the house. We've got Keanu. We've got Kelly. So does it really do that much more for me to have yet another big target in the house in the form of Jimmy? Or is it better to have a big resume move of getting him out the door and shutting down some of this gossip and information going back and forth? So that's what her thinking is. All right, Ashley is talking to Mickey and Rachel, and she's saying that, hey, while we're in here talking, Zach and Vince and Morgan, they're outside trioing just like they always do. Ashley's still gunning for Vince, still making sure that Mickey and Rachel know that Vince is out there talking to Zach and Morgan. So still trying to get the digs in while she can. Mickey is telling Rachel and Ashley, she's saying, look, I'm not going to put up Cat this week. I don't know what I'm going to do for certain, but I've pretty much decided I'm not going to put up Cat because I don't want Riley gunning for me. And if I put her up, then I know Riley, whatever we've got between us, that's gone. And I feel like I've done a lot of damage control. I've got a relationship now with Riley. Putting her up destroys all that. So I'm not putting up Cat this week. And so they start saying, well, what other options do you have then? And it really settles on three options: Jimmy and Vince and Lauren. And yeah, I don't think Lauren's getting put up, but her name was thrown out by this group. All right, just to make things a little more interesting, the house guests got alcohol. I think they got some wine and some White Claws and different things. They got that. They also got their basket of supplies, cake mix and things like that for Kelly's birthday coming up. So yeah, Kelly, I'm sorry. You don't have the pull that Jasmine did. You're on the block on your birthday week, but at least you get to celebrate. And so yeah, so we'll have a birthday celebration. I think her birthday's on Wednesday. Could be wrong, but I think it's on Wednesday. So they'll have a little bit of a birthday celebration before getting back to the game and all of that. But they got a little alcohol and had fun with that. All right, we've got Riley and Kat and Ashley out at the hammock talking. Riley's still mad about losing his HOH. Still not sitting pretty with him that happened. He's complaining to Ashley. He said, look, no one even came to talk to me about his possible nomination picks. No one even said, hey, what are you considering before y'all do this stuff? And I think Ashley said something about, oh, you spent like 2 hours talking to Keanu, and I tried to talk to you, but you wouldn't do this. So she's kind of defending herself a little bit back to him and his complaining. He said, look, Mickey just made a bad move. That was not what she should have done. And very vocal about it. Ashley eventually says, hey, you need to control your emotions a little bit and just calm down. It's okay. And it's not a pleasant conversation. They're just snapping at each other a little bit during this thing. Later, Riley says that after Ashley leaves, Kat saying, yeah, you probably shouldn't have done that. You need to settle down and all that. And Riley says, look, I'll go talk to Mickey here in just a second. He said, I'm going to tell her she needs to make a big move this week. In other words, Kat, you're not a big move. She needs to make a big move this week. So he's going to talk to her and use that angle as a way to keep Kat off the block. They're talking about Mickey considering, or he's saying, Mickey, I think she's considering putting up Jimmy. So I'm going to push that narrative and see if we can make it happen. All right, we've got Zach and Vince talking, and the main takeaway from this one, Zach tells Vince, he says, I am as certain as anything that Jimmy is going up. That, or at least that's the way that Mickey is leaning right now, is going for Jimmy, which should make Vince, I think, feel a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, Zach's thinking that's the direction it's headed. They're both going to push that as the way to go, as opposed to Vince potentially going up on the block. All right, we've got Mickey talking to Rachel some more. She's telling Rachel that this whole push against Jimmy, this whole idea of maybe going after Jimmy, it started after Mickey and Morgan had a conversation with Kat when they realized that Jimmy was the one who had told Kat that Morgan and Mickey were going after her. And so she's saying, we told him that. He immediately told Kat. That created all this stuff between Kat and us. And Jimmy's just been creating targets amongst different groups, and we're recognizing that now. And so that's why now we're looking at Jimmy as a primary needs to go kind of target. Mickey is saying that Jimmy is nervous. She says, Jimmy is so nervous. Does that mean that he doesn't trust me? Well, Mickey, maybe he shouldn't trust you since he looks like he's a leading candidate for your renom today. But she's feeling like the fact that he's so willing to believe that she would put him up means he doesn't trust her. Maybe he just knows Mickey enough. But yeah, she's talking about that. We've got Jimmy feeling a little nervous as well. It wasn't just Vince, who maybe is picking up his little spidey tingling sense and all that, because Jimmy is up checking in with Mickey and Morgan. And he's saying, so what are you thinking? What's going on here? Mickey's very good about, she didn't say, you're safe, or she says, yeah, Kat's the obvious choice, right? Right? Jimmy, yeah, absolutely. She's the obvious choice. That means she's going to be the choice. But she's saying, yeah, Kat, obvious choice here, Jimmy. Jimmy is saying that, he said, look, if you put up Kat, I really don't think that Riley's going to come for you, Mickey. I don't think so. Even if Kat goes up, I think Riley will still be okay with you. Yeah, right. I don't think anyone's buying that at all. But that's one of the arguments Jimmy's making of why it would be okay to put Kat up on the block at this point. Uh, Jimmy is saying that if Kat was to go home this week and he won HOH next week, he would put up Keanu and Kelly and Riley. In other words, all the people that aren't named Mickey or Morgan at this point in time. Now, saying that you go after Riley, I don't know how well that goes over with Mickey, because she does feel like suddenly she's got him on her side. So who knows? But yeah, he's saying Keanu and Kelly, they stay the primary targets at this point in game. And with that being said, here's to hoping with both fingers crossed that Jimmy, if he does stay this week, that Jimmy does not win HOH. I do not want to see another HOH. I don't want to see Keanu and Kelly and Riley on the block for yet another time. Let's get some new blood going here. But that's what he's saying he would do if he was HOH. Jimmy's talking about, remember Vince said he's a little bit worried about Jimmy. Well, Jimmy's saying he's a little bit worried about Vince. He says, Vince has talked to everyone. He has all his one-on-ones with everyone. Jimmy's saying, I just don't think that Vince is ready to pick a side. Jimmy later tells Rachel, says, maybe I need to be a little more definitive in my picking of a side so that people don't think that I'm floating back and forth too much. So he's throwing Vince under the bus for not picking a side, while also recognizing that he's kind of been doing the same thing, and maybe he needs to fix that sooner rather than later. But yeah, he's saying that he's worried about Vince. Mickey is questioning. Mickey really starts interrogating Jimmy. This is upstairs in the HOH. Morgan's up there as well, and he's really questioning Jimmy about his conversation with Keanu, for example, saying, y'all talked for a long time. What went on with that? And she's saying, how is it that after you talked to Keanu, suddenly now Keanu's coming after myself and Morgan, but you're out of the equation? It's like he's not coming after you anymore, Jimmy. Well, what was that conversation about? Jimmy is saying, there wasn't any game talk. He said, I just felt sorry for Keanu. He's being so ostracized. I was picked on as a kid, so I relate, and I hate to see him just by himself. So I was just trying to be a good person, have a conversation with him. It wasn't anything more than that. Mickey's not buying it. Jimmy is saying that it sounds like Morgan and Mickey maybe think that Jimmy threw them under the bus to Keanu, saying, I didn't do that, if that's what y'all are implying. But it seems like that's what y'all are suggesting, that suddenly y'all are saying he's not coming for me. And so what did I do? Am I the snitch of the house kind of thing? So he's mentioning that to her. Mickey is saying, look, I was cool with Keanu. As I think back about it, I was cool with Keanu until you came to me and said that, she's just cooking her way to the top comment and all that. And Jimmy's saying, well, he said it. I mean, he did say it. I was just passing on the information. It's not that Jimmy is saying things that are completely untrue. It's just he puts a little extra spin on things, and he makes sure that people know. I get the strategy. I did some of it myself between Mickey and Christy during my season. You try to drive some wedges here and there. Jimmy's just getting caught doing it. So, but Mickey is saying, I was okay with him until you gave me that little comment. Mickey is asking, saying, look, just to be just out there, very clear in it, did you make any kind of deal with Keanu for safety as part of y'all's conversation? Somehow you give him safety and he's not coming for you. And Jimmy says, nah, I didn't do anything like, no, it was just conversation to see how he's doing. That is all there is to it. Later, Morgan tells Mickey that he had felt some distrust from regarding this conversation a little bit later. Morgan says, hey, Jimmy talked to me about the fact that y'all talked. So I guess Morgan wasn't here during this first part of this conversation. Morgan says, Jimmy Jimmy said that y'all had this conversation and he felt like maybe you weren't completely trusting in him. Well, good job picking that up, Jimmy, because that is absolutely the case. All right, we've got Rachel talking to Kat, telling Kat that she does not want Riley and Kat getting split up at this point in time. She's, I'm all for the showman. Y'all are it. I'm all for the relationship. I don't want either one of y'all going home this week because of it. Kat responds says, I really like Riley. Yeah, I don't know if it's I feel like grade school. Do you like him or do you like him, Kat? They didn't go into the details, but she said, I like Riley. I don't want him going anywhere. And Rachel saying, yeah, I don't want that to happen either. All right, we've got Ava talking a little bit. She's saying that she likes Jimmy and Vinny, that she thinks that putting up she's talking to Mickey. Sorry about that. She's saying she likes Jimmy and Vinny, that she thinks that probably putting up Vinny maybe is a little bit safer choice. But she's also saying, but Mickey, if you sent Jimmy home, that would be a boss move. America would love seeing someone do something like that. So, do you want to take a little riskier approach by going after Jimmy that the America's going to love? Or maybe a little more safe and going after Vinny. That's kind of the consideration you got to make here, Mickey. She thinks Ava thinks that Jimmy's probably a bigger player in terms of his impact in the game and everything else than in Vince as far as their gameplay so far. Mickey is saying that Jimmy's the one who's been putting up Keanu against Mickey and Morgan. So there's some incentive to maybe go after him for just him doing that. Ava is saying that, look, if you put up Jimmy, if you do that, you're probably going to gain some favor with Keanu and Kelly. Doesn't mean y'all are going to be best buds, but if you do that, they're going to be appreciative of it. It could open up some new avenues there. So, you got to keep that in mind as well, Mickey. Mickey is wondering if she did put up Vince as opposed to Mickey, if she could convince Vince. Convince Vince. She's wondering if she could convince Vince that he's only there as a way to make sure that just to take out Kelly, just as a person who could win the competition, so Kelly could, so they could send out Kelly out the door. In other words, can she convince Vince that? I keep saying it. Could she convince Vince that he is just there as a pawn? She didn't know if that would work or not. Ava is saying that, look, Vinny is, again, definitely the safer choice, but do you want to make the safe choice this week? Mickey is saying that her gut, she recognizes that's the safer choice, but her gut is saying maybe she needs to go for Jimmy this week. All right, we've got Vinny aware of some of the whispers that are taking place. He's telling Lauren that if he goes on the block and he doesn't win blockbuster competition and Kelly does, in other words, if he's on the block versus Riley, he said, I probably lose the vote against Riley and I probably go home. That's where the state of my game is right now. So Vince's very worried about the way this situation is unfolding. He's also wondering if maybe he should do something crazy today at the veto ceremony, blow up Jimmy's game. Says, if I'm going to go out, I might as well go out with a bang. So veto ceremony could be fun. If now, would he call Jimmy out before the veto's decision's been made or only afterwards if he gets called out? Not sure on that, but Vince is wondering if he needs to maybe amp up the chaos just a little bit more. And I'm all for it. We won't get to see it, I don't think, as part of the live feeds, but I'm still all for it, Vince. All right, we've got Mickey talking to Morgan. Mickey's telling Morgan that her three possible candidates, after all the conversations, her three possible candidates are Kat or Jimmy or Vince. The ones we've been hearing talk about. Mickey is talking about the duos and the trios in the house. She's trying to figure out who is with who. She's basically saying, all right, you got Morgan. Morgan, you're with Zach and Vince. Jimmy's with Rachel. Keanu's with Kelly. Ava's with Will. Ashley's with Rachel as well. She says Ashley's kind of like the little sister of Rachel or whatever. But Ashley and Rachel are working together. You've got Lauren and Vinny are working as a duo as well. So she's kind of calling out to Morgan all the different groups. Mickey is saying that Vinny could end up getting between Mickey and Morgan if they don't send him home. It's very interesting. Mickey says, look, I know we got this group of four, you and me and Zach and Vince. I get it. We're Final Four working group, all that stuff. She said, but I also understand. I see you talking to Vince and Zach a lot more than me. And I fully understand that if push came to shove, they're both taking you over me. Am I a fool to continue to work with them and not try to go after Vince when I know that I'm kind of at the bottom of the totem pole with y'all three? And I get what she's saying, but on the other hand, you got some other time. You also don't want to necessarily go after your allies who at least should be protecting you for the next few weeks, at least you would think, right? But she's wondering about that. Morgan doesn't have a good answer for her. Morgan just says, I understand what you're saying. And then tries to continue to push Jimmy instead as well. Mickey is saying that there's a lot of people who would take shots at Jimmy, not as many who would be willing to take shots at Vince. So yet another reason why maybe while she's got the chance, she should be going after Vince this week. Mickey really during this conversation seems to be leaning towards putting Vince up as opposed to Jimmy, and Morgan is certainly resisting that particular idea. Morgan is saying, look, if you put up Vince, that's my number one guy. That's who I'm getting all this information from. You're cutting off my information source. It's going to hurt all of us if you get rid of Vince at that point in time. Morgan is questioning if Kat and Riley have their numbers. Again, she doesn't want Vince up. If you aren't going to put up Jimmy, go back to considering Kat. So she's saying, do you really have Kat and Riley? Or are they just telling you that because you're in charge this week, and then as soon as you finish up your service, they're back on the other side? And Mickey's saying, no, I think we really could pull them in as if we play our cards right here. Mickey is saying, look, if I put up Vince, it's not because he's coming for me. I get that I'm safe with Vince. She says it's not because of that. If I put up Vince, it's simply because he's a bigger player than anyone else in this house, and it'd be a big move for me and all. It's not because I feel threatened. It's just about me furthering my game a little bit and all of that. So yeah, so Morgan and Mickey not on the same page as far as this renom. All right, we've got Keanu talking to Morgan and Mickey about Jimmy maybe going up on the block, maybe going home this week. He's saying, it works for me. I'm perfectly fine. Yeah, send Jimmy out the door. Absolutely. Guys, I think it's a great idea. Go for it. He's talking about that. He's saying, look, if that's the case, I'm HOH next week. I would put up Rachel and Ashley and Lauren. Again, I wouldn't put up y'all. I've got my targets picked out. That's who I would put up. And he says Rachel and Ashley for obvious reasons. Lauren, I could use the excuse that she put me up. So those are the three maybe I could go for. Morgan and Mickey are saying that, hey, if Jimmy stays and they're on his bad side, what does that do to their game? And at the end, they say, it probably doesn't matter. If everyone's kind of opposed to Jimmy, it's kind of like being on Keanu's bad side. Does it really matter at the end of the day? They didn't say that, but that's basically what they're suggesting is if we're on his bad side, if everyone's called him out already, maybe it's not the end of the world. So even in a worst case situation, if he does get himself pulled off the block, maybe it's okay, even with that. They're wondering what America thinks in terms of, would we want Jimmy out the door? Would we be upset with him for wanting Jimmy out the door? Don't worry about what we think. Play your game the way you need to play your game. All right, we've got Mickey talking to Morgan, telling Morgan that she spends a lot of time with Vince. And she's saying, if I go for Jimmy, I'm potentially removing one of my close allies. Instead of someone that I know would keep you over me. Again, kind of this conversation we talked about a little while ago about him and Zach and Morgan being so close. Mickey is saying that, look, if we put up Jimmy, could we tell him that so he can beat Kelly, so we can send Kelly out the door? Maybe that's we go for that approach as well. So they've moved from considering whether they should do it to now how do they do damage control if they do it. And I say if Mickey does it. All right, we've got finally Rachel and Jimmy are talking. Rachel is saying that, look, Vince has to go. In other words, not Jimmy. Vince has to go. And again, she's talking to Jimmy. So she's saying Vince needs to go here, Jimmy. She's saying if you go on the block, you need to win this blockbuster competition to stay in this house. I'm not sure when it comes to a vote versus Riley that it would be so good. So Jimmy, you need to do what you can to avoid going on the block. If you do go on, you better be ready for this blockbuster competition. They're complaining. She's complaining about people just wanting her to be the first jury member. Again, Jimmy's the one who brought this information to her, and she's saying, I don't want to be the first jury member. That's not what I came into this game to play at all. Rachel is warning Jimmy. She's saying, "Look, Jimmy, you got to stop talking to everyone because you're getting reputation. Maybe a little too late for that, but she's saying you're getting a reputation." And this is where Jimmy, at one point in the conversation, says, "Yeah, maybe I'm not doing a good enough job defining my lines. I need to define that line better and make sure everyone understands what side of the line I'm on." You better be doing it real dang quick, Jimmy, or you're going to be out of time, and it won't matter what that line is because you'll already be on the block. And then finally, we've got Mickey and Vince talking. Mickey basically tells Vince, "I'm ready. I want to send Jimmy home." Now, is she going to tell Vince that she wants to send him home? No. So this is not a definitive answer. But at the end of the evening, at least to this person, she's saying she wants to send Jimmy home. If it's my opinion, I kind of think it could be Jimmy going up on the block this week, or going up at the veto ceremony as a renom. We'll find out later today. With that, Vince is the last one up, walking around as he tends to do, getting ready for bed and all that. Finally in bed about 3:30 or so, Big Brother time. And there you have it, guys. So we're going to have a veto ceremony this afternoon. Assume it'll be this afternoon. We'll have a veto ceremony this afternoon. Keanu coming off the block yet again. Props to you, Keanu, for making it happen. Someone else going up. My gut tells me, just as Mickey's gut told her, my gut tells me it's probably going to be Jimmy going on the block. Jimmy's not going to be surprised, but it's still going to be a bit of a shock to his system, I do believe. And then if that happens, I don't expect Vince to call out Jimmy. If Vince goes up instead, we could have a whole nother set of fireworks. It could be an exciting day or so. So there you have it, guys. I will be back tomorrow morning to give you an update on the veto ceremony and the repercussions of that. But tonight, Cliff Notes Live, 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, same YouTube channel. We should know the results of the veto ceremony by then, so we'll be talking about it live. Bring your questions. Hit me up with all your questions about how you think this is going to go, your questions, opinions, etc. We're going to have a fun hour talking nothing but Big Brother. So, guys, have a fantastic Monday. I'll see y'all this evening or first thing in the morning. Until then, SKD143. Cheers, my friends.